I'm Mark Golub, and in election 2016, holy cow, Donald Trump will be the Republican nominee for president of the United States, unless something wholly unforeseen happens. We Americans will go to the polls in November to decide whether we prefer Hillary Clinton or Donald Trump. To so many political pundits and average Americans as well, it was virtually inconceivable at one time that Donald Trump would ever defeat Jeb Bush and Marco Rubio and Scott Walker and Chris Christie, and in the end, Ted Cruz and John Kasich. But he did. And on Tuesday night, after a seventh consecutive resounding primary victory, this time in the state of Indiana, a state where all the professionals said it was just perfect for Ted Cruz, who had a huge lead over Donald Trump just weeks ago. On Tuesday night, Ted Cruz took the stage to explain that as long as there was a path to victory, he was going to be giving it his all in defense of freedom and the Constitution and conservative principles. But after hearing the voice of the people of Indiana, who gave Donald Trump 53% of the vote to his 37%, Senator Cruz conceded there was no longer any path to victory, and he was suspending his campaign. And a day later, John Kasich also folded up his tent. It was something of a shock in a season of political shocks. Up until Indiana, Senator Cruz was arguing that no candidate would have garnered the majority requisite of 1,237 delegates needed to secure the nomination before the Republican convention in Cleveland this July, and that therefore it would be an open and brokered convention where he would win the nomination, and that was the logic being used by John Kasich as well. But Cruz can do the math, and given Donald Trump's victory in Indiana, and given his huge lead in California, it became clear to everyone that Donald Trump was going to reach the magic number of 1,237, and that it was time for him, Ted Cruz, and then John Kasich also, to leave the stage. And so now people are saying, holy cow, Donald Trump, a man who's never held public office, who does not bring a career of government experience to his bid for the White House, a businessman, real estate developer and mogul, a fabulously successful billionaire, will be one step away from becoming president of the United States. And all Donald Trump has to do now is convince independents and women and African Americans and Latinos that he is not a nincompoop, nor a racist, nor a bigot, nor a woman hater, which the overwhelming number of his supporters already know. And he must simply prove that he is less objectionable than Hillary Clinton. By the way, while it is so clear that Hillary Clinton will be the Democratic nominee, Bernie Sanders' upset victory in Indiana keeps the race going on the Democratic side, and Bernie is now arguing that since he and Hillary are very close in pledged delegates, and that her substantial lead is due only to some 500 superdelegates who could change their mind at the Democratic convention. As far as Bernie is concerned, the Democrats are now headed for a contested convention in Philadelphia. And have we ever seen such a topsy-turvy primary season where all the traditional rules seem to be thrown out the window? And speaking of windows, it brings to mind the scene from Padachevsky's film Network, where the overriding theme in both political parties this season, as Peter Finch screamed out the window, "I'm mad as hell and I'm not going to take it anymore." All those who have been confounded by Donald Trump, and to a lesser degree Bernie Sanders, they simply don't get it. A large swath of our country is simply fed up with traditional politicians and their doublespeak and their empty promises, as if the American people are dopes and children. And they're not going to take it anymore. And a majority of Republican primary voters are simply saying that they would rather trust a somewhat unknown entity, Donald Trump. They would rather trust him than any of the other 16 professional candidates who began the race with him. Well, as always, our concern here on JBS is, what does it mean for the Jewish community? And so for some opinion, I'm so pleased to have on our JBS phones a man who has a long history of first being profoundly committed to the state of Israel and the Jewish people, and also to the Republican Party, a retired investor and political activist, Ken Schwartz. And Ken, thank you so much for joining us on this edition of Election 2016.
My pleasure, Mark. You've depressed the hell out of me already.
Okay.
Glad to be here.
I said you have a long history of being deeply committed to both Israel, the Jewish people, and you happen to be a member of the Republican Party. And what I wanted, Ken, was really to speak to a partisan about how you view this dramatic development, and some would say a surprising turn of events in the Republican Party, as we now know that, again, except for some horribly unforeseen circumstances, Donald Trump will be the Republican nominee. What's your sense of that? How surprised are you, and what do you think it means for the Republican Party, for the country, and what's it mean for the Jewish community?
Well, thank you. I mean, I'm personally, I'm not a Trump guy. I'm as mystified that it happened as anyone else. I mean, human beings make theories, so I have theories after the fact, but I wouldn't have predicted it. No one predicted it. I find it horrifying and depressing, and what effect it is to the Jewish people, I have no idea. He's such an incoherent cipher that I don't think there's any rational predicting of what he'll do.
Okay.
One of the many issues with him, is that he's just so ideologically incoherent that there's just no knowing.
Okay, these are the words you've used so far. You're mystified, you're horrified, you're depressed, and Donald Trump is incoherent. Explain to me, how could he win Republican primary after Republican primary if he is all of the things you described?
He's not that to those people. People who see him the way I do don't vote for him. Let me try this angle on you. I was traveling to D.C. recently and talking to an Amtrak employee, and got around to politics, and this guy said he's voting for Trump. And I said, why? And he said, when I was 16, I left home and went to work. Times were tough. And the guy was maybe 55. He said, I've been working hard ever since, and I'm sick and tired of able-bodied people who the government is paying not to work, and that's why I'm voting for Trump. Now, if you've been paying attention in this election, you'll know that Trump has not said word one about that issue.
That's right.
And yet this guy is giving his vote because Trump is he feels Trump is addressing his major issue, which he's not at all. Mm-hmm. So basically, Trump seems to me is waving a flag that says, you have a grievance? Follow me.
Okay. Does this mean that Ken Schwartz is going to go into the polls, into the voting booth in November, and vote for Hillary Clinton? Your options now are Donald Trump, who is horrifying and depressing, or it's Hillary Clinton. What are people like you in the Republican Party going to do about that problem?
Well, I don't know. I mean, look, some will vote for Trump, some will vote for Hillary, and some won't vote.
You understand? Anybody who doesn't vote is voting for Hillary. If Republicans want a Republican in the White House, they've got to vote for Donald Trump. Otherwise, they're saying to the Democrat, "It's yours."
I mean, you're right. You're right to some extent. I would disagree, however, as follows. One, you can make the case that Trump isn't a Republican. That's number one. And number two, in a state like Connecticut, where you and I live, in the presidential election, our vote really doesn't count. In many states, it doesn't count because there's a foregone conclusion of who will get the electoral vote.
Why is Hillary Clinton horrifying?
I find her horrifying on a personal level. I think she's a dishonest, entitled, insincere individual. But the fact is, there certainly are progressives who are not dishonest and insincere and unlikable. And if one of those was running, I wouldn't vote for that person either. I'm not in favor of the progressive point of view.
All right.
So the personal issues aside with her, I'm against that philosophy. So she just happens to be less likable than most. But even put in a likable one, I wouldn't vote for that person either.
So is it fair for me to say that at the moment you expect the Democrats to win the White House and you're worried that Donald Trump will be beaten so soundly that Republicans may lose the House and Senate?
Make I wouldn't predict it. I wouldn't predict anything. I wouldn't be shocked if he won. I wouldn't be shocked if he won. I make no predictions whatsoever. Certainly what you're saying is possible that he'll lose badly, and it'll hurt the down ticket, and some important senators like Portman and Ayotte and Ron Johnson could lose their seats, and anything else is possible too. Who the hell knows?
Ken, you say it so well, and I'm so appreciative of you giving us some time. We will watch what happens over the next months, and maybe we'll talk again. But, you know, I love you, and I'm so pleased that you had a moment to give us here on JBS, so you be well.
My pleasure, Mark. Thanks for calling.
Be well. Bye-bye.
All the best. Bye-bye.
The thoughts of Ken Schwartz, retired investor and political activist, who represents those Jewish Republicans who do not support Donald Trump and who will either vote for Hillary Clinton or will not vote at all, which again is a vote for Hillary. Well, what is Jewish leadership's response to Donald Trump's becoming the Republican nominee? For some answers, we're joined once again from Washington by the outstanding bureau chief of the JTA, Ron Kampeas. Ron, welcome back to JBS.
Hi, thanks for having me.
So, Ron, you wrote a column for the JTA about Trump's becoming the presumptive Republican nominee. The piece was given the title, Donald Trump Set to be Republican Nominee, Maverick Israel Views and All. Now, I assume, Ron, as usual, you did not write that title. Someone at the JTA wrote it, because your piece, I don't see it suggesting that Donald Trump has maverick views on Israel. In fact, you describe how strong Trump's pledge on Israel now is, that his embrace of Israel would be second to none, that he would rip up the Iran nuclear deal, he would move the U.S. embassy from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem, and he would make his first visit to the region to Israel. You also quote Trump's telling the Daily Mail that he does not oppose settlements and feels Israel has never been treated properly by the U.S. So what about Donald Trump's views on Israel are maverick as far as the JTA editor is concerned?
Oh, I think in the first instance, you're talking about what Cruz's positions were. Trump definitely believes that the Iran deal was a bad deal. He hasn't said he's going to abrogate it. He said he wants to consult with his folks beforehand, which is smart. I think that's like that's the more reasonable response. But he does think it's a bad deal. And he says he does recognize Jerusalem as Israel's capital. That's one thing that more recently he shared with Cruz. I think it's just because he's unpredictable. Maybe unpredictable is more apt than maverick, because that's the word he uses on himself. His one of his advisors, Walid Fares, just told an Arabic language outlet in the Middle East that he is committed to bringing about a two-state solution. And my good friend Ben Linfield wrote on Media Line, noticing an interesting subtlety in Fares's pitch, he said Fares told this Arabic language outlet that Donald Trump understands that Israel-Palestine is the key to stalling instability in the Middle East. That's like in Washington, that is so old hat that it's almost new. Nobody believes. I mean, considering what's going on in the Middle East with everything else that has nothing to do with Israel, that's certainly was the conventional view maybe in the 1980s. It's not a view now. It's kind of seen as a blame Israel view. Now, obviously, that's his advisor. He's off the reservation. But again, it's unpredictable, and it's unpredictable born partly from a strategy by Trump. He doesn't like to be predictable, but it's also just, I think, a newness. He hasn't yet gathered around him, and he might now that he is the presumptive nominee, but he hasn't gathered around him the old hands to advise him on these matters.
Yes. By the way, I seem to remember that this was the position early on in the Obama administration, that in some way the Obama administration said, if we solve the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, we will solve the problems of the Middle East. I'm not sure it goes back to the 1980s, Ron.
It does go back to the 1980s, and I'll explain what the difference is. What Obama was saying, and again, I'm not endorsing this view. I don't know if it really played out. It doesn't hurt. It's like chicken soup, the old chicken soup. It's not necessarily gonna solve everything, solving Israel-Palestine, but taking it off the table doesn't hurt. And incidentally, that's what the Bush administration, the George W. Bush administration, believed as well. In other words, it's certainly not the core issue in terms of stability, but it's one that once you remove it from the table, once you solve it, it gets one irritant out of the way, as opposed to being the central irritant.
Okay, you may be right, and I may be wrong. I'm going to look it up. My recollection is it was more central to the Obama administration's policy than you're saying it was, but you may be absolutely right. So, Ron, we've discussed many times on JBS how the vast majority of American Jews vote Democrat, 70% and more. So those 70% were not going to vote for any Republican nominee, and the fact that it's now Donald Trump this time around is really irrelevant. The real Jewish question is, what will the other 30% of American Jewry do? And we just spoke to one Jewish Republican who feels Donald Trump is a disaster and says he will either vote for Hillary Clinton or not vote at all. I want to know if you've heard anything yet from Republican Jewish leaders, whether they will now support Donald Trump or not.
Yeah, there's I think you could sort of, I was talking about this in the staff meeting just before we called. You could even kind of, it's not binary. It's more like there's a trajectory. I think that there are definitely the people who are saying, not going to vote Trump, going to vote for Hillary. There are the people like Ari Fleischer who are saying reluctantly, we'll vote for Trump. There are the people like Norm Coleman. Ari Fleischer, of course, is the former spokesman for George W. Bush. Norm Coleman, former Minnesota senator, very prominent in Jewish Republican politics, who's like never Trump, but still not quite at voting for Hillary. And then there are, like I said, there are the people who are going to vote for Hillary. I mean, the most in the general political world, probably the biggest one this week is Mark Salter, who for 12 years was an advisor to John McCain, was one of his chief foreign policy advisors in the 2008 campaign. I don't know if he's Jewish or not, but even before there was Mark Salter, there was Robert Kagan, who is a neoconservative thinker. He was at the American Enterprise Institute. Now he's at Brookings, and he was one of the first who said a few months ago, "I'm going to vote for Hillary if Trump gets the nomination." So there's a range there, and of course there are the enthusiastic Jewish Trump followers, the people who are close to him, like his advisor Michael Cohen. There are I think there are others who there's a Republican Jewish macher, so to speak, in Florida, Sid Dinerstein, who's quite enthusiastic about Trump. There's a range out there.
Okay. What have you heard Sheldon Adelson's going to do?
I think Adelson's. There's two things we know about Sheldon Adelson. The first thing is, or three things. Okay, the first thing is a few months ago, he had a reception for the school that he helps fund in Las Vegas, a very nice school. I've been there, the Adelson Educational Campus, and it was and he didn't realize, I think, that there was somebody there who was taking video, and somebody asked him, would you support Trump? And he said, why not? And that why not made headlines.
Mm-hmm.
It was, so it's a kind of a reluctant kind of endorsement.
Okay. By the way, I remember the vitriol that was expressed between Hillary Clinton and Barack Obama in the 2008 Democratic primary. And many people were worried that the Democratic Party would also split apart, that there would be these two camps that would never be able to work together. The minute it was decided, Hillary Clinton was endorsing Barack Obama. She was encouraging all of her supporters to vote for Barack Obama. And I have seen this time and time again. The primary season tends to be one of ugliness, and I see at the end of it party members coming together, and even people who were saying pretty nasty things to each other side by side on the stage, they end up endorsing each other and rallying around the flag, so to speak.
Yeah, and you're seeing that to a degree. You're seeing that with Trump, with Chris Christie, with Ben Carson backing him. I think that as bitter as the 2008 election was with Hillary Clinton and with Barack Obama, you don't see what you saw yesterday. You didn't see what you saw yesterday with Trump accusing Rafael Cruz, Ted Cruz's father, of having been involved in the John F. Kennedy assassination.
By the way, Ron, he never accused him.
All
he said was, I have a picture here, which I am told that Ted Cruz's father is in the picture next to Donald Trump.
Today he said, this is the thing with Donald Trump. You have to track very closely what he says. Yesterday he said he's in the picture.
That's
Today,
all.
He said, I'm told it's him in the picture. Look at what he told Fox and Friends yesterday. You'll see. He's saying unequivocally, that's Rafael Cruz in the picture. Why isn't anybody looking into this? It's horrible. Why isn't it? That's Rafael Cruz in the picture. Today he said, and it's a ridiculous thing to bring up anyway. It's like one of the craziest things to. It's such a tenuous connection. It's utterly refutable. There are pictures from Rafael Cruz from that period that look like nothing like the figure in the picture. There is nothing that connects that figure in the picture to Rafael Cruz. Why even bring it up? And in any case, I mean, it's not so much what Donald Trump's strange bringing up of the picture. It's more what Cruz said in response. This is the runner-up, the second biggest delegate getter, the second biggest vote getter in the primaries, and he called Donald Trump pathological liar and utterly amoral. How do you? I don't see Cruz standing next to Donald Trump on the platform. I'm not saying that the party more or less won't rally around him. I think, on the other hand, it has to be said that it's germane that as soon as Indiana was announced, Reince Priebus, the chairman of the party, said Donald Trump is the nominee. He has the establishment behind him now. I just don't see how a lot of this bitterness goes away. And believe me, the Democrats aren't going to forget this. They're going to be running these statements on a loop throughout the campaign.
Yes, and by the way, Trump says he's going to run the things that Bernie Sanders says about Hillary over and over. This is American politics. And by the way, it's been American politics for as long as I remember watching this stuff. And it sounds like you will be surprised if one day Ted Cruz stands next to Donald Trump. I will not be surprised.
I don't know. Ted Cruz, I'm not sure. I think he sees. He has a number of options he can play. He can be relevant. First of all, Ted Cruz, his whole reputation has been made on not caring what other people in the party say about him.
Yeah.
So I think you have to give him that integrity.
Absolutely.
I don't know if you're going to see him
Yeah.
doing that, and he doesn't need that kind of pander. One of the best strategies for Ted Cruz right now would be to sit out this election, watch the party possibly implode, maybe not, and then come back in 2020 and say, "Look, I was right." That could be his best option.
Okay.
Go ahead.
You know, people have pointed out that Donald Trump was somewhat conciliatory toward Ted Cruz in his remarks after the Indiana win, and you actually write about that in your piece. Trump called Cruz a hell of a competitor, a tough, smart guy with an amazing future, congratulated Ted and his whole beautiful family. He also said what Ted did was a brave thing to do, a great thing to do, because we have to bring unity to the party. To what extent do you believe, and I'm asking you now a larger question than just what are Republican Jews going to do? Do you think that Donald Trump will be able to unite the Republican Party, or do you believe that it will be fractionalized to such a degree that Hillary Clinton will just walk into the White House?
I think that Hillary Clinton has a good shot at the White House. I don't think it's necessarily because the party is imploding. I think that Trump has a good chance at uniting the party. I think that there's a nothing succeeds like success dynamics to any political party. I think it's especially true of the Republicans. Like I've said before, you have to admire the integrity of the folks who fought tooth and nail against Trump in the leading up to this, and who said, "Look, a winner's a winner, and we have to go for him." I don't see Ted Cruz himself endorsing Donald Trump. I wouldn't be surprised if a lot of the people who are backing Ted Cruz move into Donald Trump's camp because they're not identified with the vitriol that Ted Cruz personally, exhibited yesterday when after the whole weird JFK thing came up, and so that could happen. I see that happening. I think that the things that are daunting for a Trump White House bid are less within the Republican Party and more in the general population. Can he reduce his negatives among women? Can he reduce his negatives among Hispanics? Can he reduce his negatives among African Americans? Conversely, are the old political adages true? Do you still need, if you're a Republican, do you still need 40% of the Hispanic vote in order to win the White House, or can you pull it off with less if you get others to come in? Those are the questions that are going to be asked. I think more or less. I mean, you're seeing something very interesting happening in the Republican Party now. It's kind of reshaping itself. I think a lot of the grassroots are going to stick around. There'll be a lot of rationalization. CNN had a very interesting focus group the other night in which it was all women, all Republicans. They all really didn't like Donald Trump. But when they were asked if they were going to vote for him, there were some who said yes, and there were others who are looking around and saying, "How could you possibly vote for him?" Yeah. So you're going to see that. I think you're going to see that kind of dynamic play out.
Okay. By the way, I think you have identified the real issues, and I want to keep watching this with you. I mean, the fact that now we have Trump sort of solidified, still, you and I believe it's going to be Hillary, but they're still working this out in the Democratic Party. As the entire process goes on, I want to always come back to you. You'll let us know what you hear in the Jewish community, and I also appreciate your larger analysis. Ron, thank you very, very much, and great work all the time.
Thank you.
Be well. Ron Kampeas, the Washington Bureau Chief of the JTA, the Jewish Telegraphic Agency. What a fascinating roller coaster ride this primary season has been, and the ride is far from over. My thanks to our director and production coordinator, Serge Goldberg, editor Dennis Golan, to the associate director of JBS, Dara Golub, and to the producer of In the News and Election 2016, Carol Lilienthal. Until the next time, I'm Mark Golub. Be well, my friends.